She was invisible to him, and that was his biggest mistake. It was a Friday night, and the kind of cold that makes your fingers ache even through gloves. Maya pulled her apron tighter and pushed through the back entrance of Bellini's, the upscale Italian restaurant where she had worked for the past 3 years. She wasn't supposed to be there that night. It was the annual corporate dinner for Westgate Holdings, one of the restaurant's biggest private events of the year. But her manager had called in a panic. 2 servers had canceled last minute and they needed her. Maya needed the money, so she said yes. What she didn't know, what nobody bothered to warn her, was that the guest list included someone she had spent 6 painful months trying to forget. Daniel Reeves, her ex-boyfriend, the man who had walked out of her apartment 18 months ago with nothing but a cold goodbye and a box of her things left on the doorstep. The man who had told her more than once and in more ways than one that she was going nowhere, that she lacked ambition, that she would never be more than a girl in an apron taking orders from people who actually mattered. And now here she was, in an apron, taking orders. She spotted him the moment she walked onto the floor. He was laughing at the center table, surrounded by colleagues in pressed suits, his arm loosely draped over the back of a chair like he owned the room. For a second, Maya's feet stopped moving. Her chest tightened. Every memory she had worked so hard to bury came rushing back in one cold wave. But she had bills to pay and a shift to get through, so she straightened her spine, picked up her tray, and got to work. She told herself she could get through the night without him even noticing her. She was wrong. He noticed her the moment she approached the first table near his, and the look on his face wasn't surprise, it was something worse. It was amusement. A slow, condescending smile spread across his face as his eyes moved from her face down to her uniform and then back up again. He leaned over and whispered something to the man sitting next to him. They both laughed. Maya kept her eyes forward. She took the order, she walked away. But the night was only getting started. Over the next hour, Daniel made sure she knew he was watching. He called her over with a lazy wave of his hand, the way someone might flag down a cab. He sent back a glass of sparkling water, claiming it tasted flat. He snapped his fingers, actually snapped his fingers when he wanted a refill. Each time, Maya responded with professional calm and a polite smile that cost her more than anyone in that room could have imagined. Some of his colleagues looked embarrassed, others didn't seem to notice at all. One woman at the table caught Maya's eye and gave her a small, sympathetic look, the kind that says, "I see what's happening and I'm sorry," but said nothing. And then, just before the main course was served, the evening changed entirely. Right now, before we go any further, drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from tonight. It doesn't matter if you're in New York or Nigeria, Sao Paulo or Seoul. I want to know where in the world the Curious Neighbor's Diary is reaching tonight. Let's build this community together, one city at a time. And if you're new here and this is your first time watching, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and join thousands of people who come here every week for stories that make you feel something real. Now, back to Maya and the moment that changed everything. The owner of Bellini's was a man named Vincent Caruso. He was 62 years old, silver-haired, and the kind of man who had spent 40 years in the restaurant business and could read a room the way other people read books. He had built Bellini's from a tiny 12-table trattoria into one of the most respected dining establishments in the city. He was also, on most Friday nights, nowhere near the floor. He preferred to stay in his office reviewing numbers and making calls. But that night, he had come out to personally greet the Westgate Holdings Group. It was a big account. He wanted to make sure everything was perfect. What he saw when he stepped onto the floor was not perfect. He watched Daniel snap his fingers at Maya. He watched the smirk. He watched the sent-back water and the lazy waves and the small humiliations that Daniel seemed to be enjoying with the quiet confidence of someone who believed there would be no consequences. Vincent stood near the edge of the room for several minutes watching. His expression was unreadable. Then he walked over to the Westgate table. Everyone straightened up. Vincent Caruso had that kind of presence. He welcomed the group warmly, shook hands, made easy conversation. And then he did something that nobody at that table expected. He turned around and called Maya over by name. "Maya," he said in a clear, calm voice that carried across the table, "please come here for a moment." She came. Her expression was carefully neutral, the professional mask she had been wearing all evening still in place.
Vincent placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of respect, not familiarity, and addressed the entire table. "I want to introduce you all to someone," he said. "This is Maya Chen. She has been with Bellini's for 3 years, and in that time I have never once had to tell her twice how to do something. She understands hospitality in a way that most people in this industry spend a lifetime trying to learn." He paused. "We've actually been in conversations about expanding her role here significantly. I'll just say this, the next chapter of Bellini's is going to look very different, and Maya is going to be a central part of it." The table was quiet. Daniel's smile had disappeared entirely. Maya stood still, her heart hammering in her chest, her face calm. But Vincent wasn't finished. He looked at her directly, not at the table, not at Daniel, and said the words that would replay in Maya's mind for months afterward. "In fact," he said, "I think of her as my future partner in this business." The silence that followed lasted only a second. Then came the polite sounds of impressed acknowledgement from the table, the murmurs, the raised eyebrows. One executive actually said, "Well, you're lucky to have her." Daniel said nothing. He picked up his water glass and looked at it. After Vincent excused himself and Maya returned to her duties, she kept moving through the room with the same steady professionalism she had maintained all evening. But something inside her had shifted, not because Vincent had defended her, though that mattered more than she could say, but because she realized for the first time in a long time that the story Daniel had told about her was never true. It had only been true inside his version of reality, and his version of reality, as it turned out, was very, very small. The conversation with Vincent had started 3 weeks earlier in his office with a cup of coffee and a folder of ideas Maya had quietly put together over 2 years. Observations about the customer experience, suggestions for a loyalty program, a detailed proposal for a private events model that could increase revenue by 30%. She had been nervous handing it over. She'd almost didn't. Vincent had read every page, twice. He called her back the following week and said he wanted to talk seriously about her future at Bellini's. Nobody at that corporate dinner table knew that story. They only knew what they saw in the moment, a restaurant owner who introduced his server as his future partner. But the truth behind that moment was built slowly, page by page, shift by shift, in the quiet hours when no one was watching and no one was applauding, and there was no audience at all. That's the part that gets lost in these stories. We see the moment of recognition and we want to believe it came out of nowhere, that the universe just decided to serve justice hot on a Friday night. But the universe doesn't really work that way. What looks like a sudden reversal is almost always the visible tip of something that was being built underground for a long time. Maya had been doing the work. She had been doing it without permission and without praise and without any guarantee that anyone would ever notice. She had been doing it because she cared and because she was good at it and because somewhere underneath all the doubt that Daniel had planted in her, she still believed it mattered. And eventually, someone with eyes open enough to see it walked through the door. Daniel left the dinner early. He said he had another commitment. His colleagues didn't seem particularly surprised. Maya finished her shift, cleaned her station, and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before driving home. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vindicated in the dramatic movie moment way she might have imagined. She felt something quieter and more lasting than that. She felt like herself again. 2 months later, Maya signed a partnership agreement with Vincent Caruso. She oversees operations and client development. The private events program she designed launched in the spring. It sold out its first season in 3 weeks. She still works the floor sometimes when they're short-staffed. She still wears an apron. She still loves it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of a moment when someone underestimated you, or a time when you were doing the quiet work and wondering if it would ever matter, tell me in the comments. Your stories are what make this channel real. And if you're not already part of the Curious Neighbors Diary family, now is the perfect time to subscribe. Every week we bring you stories like this one, about ordinary people living through extraordinary moments right next door. You don't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next story.